After 15 years at Ridgeway Events and Media, I sat in the office I had practically built from scratch, surrounded by gear I'd purchased with my own money, ideas I'd nurtured into full-blown systems, and memories of deadlines that nearly broke me. The laminated sign above my desk read, "Problem Solver in Chief," a joke from my team. Only now, the joke was on me. "Lisa," my boss Greg said, not meeting my eyes. "Due to restructuring, we're downsizing your position." I blinked once. The air conditioning hummed in the silence between us. He continued, "We're bringing in a new hire, fresh out of university. She'll be trained to handle media, event logistics, and, well, all the things you used to handle." This wasn't just a layoff. This was a replacement. A clean slate, a budget reset, a slap in the face after 15 years of doing 5 jobs for the price of one. "I understand," I said calmly, because I did. Not the logic, but the message. "You're too old, too expensive, too hard to control." Greg exhaled like he was relieved I wasn't making a scene. "You'll need to clear your office by Friday," he added, "and take everything that's yours. You won't be coming back." I smiled slightly. "Of course, I'll take everything that's mine." 15 years ago, I was hired as a media designer. Just that, one role. But when the marketing manager quit, I stepped up. When the events lead had a breakdown during a 500-person conference, I took over. When the AV supplier bailed last minute, I ran to my car, grabbed my own microphones, cables, lights, and got the job done. The company never bothered replacing missing gear, so I kept bringing mine in, piece by piece, year by year. Camera rigs, light kits, spare cables, soundboards. And every piece had my name written on it, just in case. They always laughed at that detail. That detail would soon become everything. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to notice, was that their entire AV infrastructure, their live streaming setup, their mobile event unit, was mine. Not metaphorically, literally mine. By Thursday morning, I arrived early, before Greg, before the new girl, before HR, and I started packing. The first few boxes were easy. Labeled hard cases filled with mics, stands, and mixing decks. Then came the modular lights, wireless cams, HDMI extenders. I had every receipt saved in a neatly labeled folder on Google Drive. Then came the crown jewel, the control booth. Greg found me as I was unlocking the door with my own key. You can't take that stuff," he stammered. "Oh? Why not?" "It's essential to our event setup." I raised an eyebrow. "Yes, it is. That's why I brought it in. Want to see the receipts?" He hesitated, then gestured vaguely behind him. "Well, maybe just leave the booth gear, at least until we train the new girl." I smiled sweetly. "You said I wouldn't be coming back, Greg. I'm just doing exactly what you told me to do." I loaded up my Ford Explorer with help from Tara, one of the only coworkers who still had a soul. With every box we loaded, his face looked more and more like bad lighting at a gala, she whispered. By noon, half the storage closet was empty. Every piece of gear labeled LJ was mine. I knew because I'd labeled it. All those years of staying late to organize, repair, replace, now they were stacked neatly in cardboard boxes. By 2 p.m., the live stream equipment was gone. By 3:30, the backup servers I'd brought in for remote events, yep, gone too. Greg was pacing the hallway now, phone in hand, red-faced, whispering into his sleeve. They thought I was disposable. But they never once asked, what if everything we rely on leaves with her? When I finally drove off, my SUV sagging under the weight of a company's forgotten foundation, Greg stood at the curb, silent, confused. But it was Friday I left, and Monday would be fascinating. Because on Monday, Ridgeway Events had a high-profile event with over 300 guests, a live broadcast, and multiple feeds across 3 cities. And they no longer had the gear, or the woman who knew how to run it. Friday evening, I drove home with my car packed tighter than a moving truck. Every bump in the road made the lighting kits rattle, the mic stands shift. I glanced in the rearview mirror at the gear that had powered dozens of conferences, charity galas, and corporate launches. And I remembered something my dad once told me. Never loan out what you're not willing to lose. That advice had guided every decision I made in the last decade, including the one to put my name on every single item I ever brought into Ridgeway events. Greg had laughed at the time. Paranoid much? He joked. Now? I imagined him staring at the empty AV booth, realizing just how much of his infrastructure had never belonged to him at all. By the time I got home, my driveway looked like a film crew had moved in. My neighbor, Mike, leaned on the fence with a beer in hand. "Big shoot this weekend?" he asked. "Not exactly," I said, exhaling as I opened the trunk. "More like the end of an era." He offered to help carry things in. As we unloaded the boxes into my garage, I told him the short version, about how I'd been let go, how they brought in someone cheaper, how they told me to take everything that was mine, and how I had. He let out a low whistle. "So what are they going to do without all this?" "That's their problem now." Saturday morning, I opened my laptop and scrolled through the event calendar on Ridgeway's public website. Monday. The big one. The Northcrest Regional Education Conference. 3 cities, remote panels, keynote from the state superintendent, live streamed to over 2,000 viewers, and every year I was the one who made it happen. I knew their playbook inside and out. The gear required, the setup time, the backup plans, the cables no one else remembered to pack. And I knew that without me, or my equipment, they were in serious trouble. But I wasn't smiling. Not really. Because this wasn't just some petty revenge fantasy. It was personal. 15 years of giving everything. Missing birthdays, anniversaries, staying up until 2 a.m. to fix a crashed feed because there's no one else who knows how. I trained interns, built workflows, prevented disasters before they happened. And in the end, I wasn't even worth a real explanation. Just a canned line about downsizing and a 20-something with a shiny degree and no real experience waiting to take over my life's work. Sunday afternoon, I got a message from Tara. "Tara. Hey, just a heads up. Greg's been calling people in a panic. Something about missing AV inventory and a broken livestream plan." I responded with a simple thumbs-up emoji. 30 minutes later, she called. "Lisa, I know you're done, but I need to tell you something. They had the intern try to set up tomorrow's event. She didn't even know what a DI box was. Greg actually asked if we could just Zoom it in with laptops. I nearly walked out." I closed my eyes. It was worse than I thought. "And the venue?" I asked. "New location this year. No built-in AV. They were counting on your kits. The wireless mics, the camera rig, the switcher. All gone." She paused. "He asked if I could maybe reach out to you. You know, just for a little help." I didn't answer right away. After a long silence, I said, "I wish I could help. But I'm just doing exactly what he told me. I took what was mine and left. I don't work there anymore." She sighed. "Didn't think you would. Just figured you should know what kind of chaos is coming." As the sun set, I walked out to my garage and flipped on the lights. Dozens of items sat neatly stacked and labeled. I ran my fingers over the lid of the road case that held the wireless transmitters, over the charger dock for the LED uplights, over the laminated emergency cable chart I made during a 3-day power outage. They hadn't just fired me. They'd amputated their only working limb and handed the scalpel to someone who didn't know which side was sharp. And now? Now they were about to try and walk on their own. Let's see how that goes. Monday was less than 12 hours away. I made tea, opened a new document on my laptop, and started writing. Not a resignation letter, not a rant. Something better, a pitch. Because after 15 years of being the invisible engine behind other people's success, I finally had a shot at building something of my own. And if Ridgeway Events wanted to burn down what we built together, I had every intention of rising from the ashes. I was halfway through my first sip of tea when the first call came in. Anonymous number. I didn't answer. Then a second, this time from Ridgway's front desk. Still no. By 8 a.m., I had 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail, and a text from Tara that simply read, "They're falling apart. I've never seen Greg like this." I believed her, because I knew exactly what they were walking into. The Northcrest Regional Education Conference was Ridgway's biggest spring event. It spanned 3 cities, each with its own tech setup, and required seamless live streaming, interactive Q&As, backup feeds, and content switching. I'd built every part of that process from the ground up, from color-coded cable routing to customized overlay graphics. And all of it? Gone. Still sitting, labeled and dust-free in my garage. At 8:32 a.m., I received a panicked voicemail from Greg. His voice was clipped and fast, like he'd already had too much coffee, or not enough sleep. "Lisa, hi, this is Greg. Look, I think there may have been some miscommunication about what equipment belonged to the company. We really need you to clarify a few things, urgently. This event is going sideways. Please call me back ASAP." I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and continued typing. The pitch deck was coming along nicely. A consulting and technical support brand for nonprofits and education conferences. Simple, clean branding, flat rates, transparent services. My tagline was almost too perfect. You don't need an agency. You need someone who gives a damn. At 9 a.m., Tara texted again. "They're trying to run everything through someone's personal iPad. Sound keeps cutting out. Audience is fidgeting. One of the panelists just said, 'Can anyone hear me?' Live on stream. They're asking for your setup diagrams. I told them I didn't have copies. I do, but I'm not giving them away for free." I smirked. Tara was loyal to a fault. And now they were finally realizing who their real backbone had been. By 10:15 a.m., my inbox lit up again. This time, it was from Alyssa, Ridgway's marketing lead. "Hi, Lisa. I hope you're doing well. Greg asked me to reach out and see if there's any chance you'd be available for a quick consult today. He's willing to compensate you for your time. Please let me know if there's any way you can help." I stared at the email for a moment. Consult. That was the word. Not help, not save us, just consult. Which legally meant billable hours, progress. But I didn't reply. Not yet. At 11 a.m., I finally allowed myself a moment to relax. Tea gone cold, emails still piling up. I walked out to the garage and opened one of the hard cases, taking inventory. Everything was still pristine, ready to deploy, ready to earn me money instead of building someone else's empire. By noon, Ridgway's live stream had been pulled offline. I didn't need Tara to tell me. Social media was already catching wind. A few conference attendees had tweeted about the failure. Biggest education event in the region can't keep their feed live for more than 30 seconds. Embarrassing. They fired the person who used to run this. That's what I heard. Wild. At 12:46 p.m., Greg called again. This time I answered. "Lisa, oh, thank God. Look, this whole thing has gotten out of hand." I didn't say anything. "I admit it," he continued. "I didn't realize how much of the AV stuff was actually yours. I should have asked more questions." Silence. "We need help. Just a few hours. I'll pay you personally if I have to." I finally spoke. "I appreciate the offer, Greg, but I don't do last-minute emergency calls for people who told me I was replaceable." He stammered. "I never said—" "You didn't need to. You said downsizing. You said, take everything that's yours." "I did. Now you're seeing what I left behind." Silence again. "Lisa, please." I sighed. "I'm happy to talk business. Not favors. Business, consulting, contracts, rates, the kind of professional respect I never got when I worked for you." Okay. Can you send over your terms?" "I already did." "You, what?" "Check your inbox." Because 15 minutes earlier, while he was busy begging, I had sent a branded quote with an emergency same-day consulting rate. 4 times my old hourly salary. And he had exactly 2 hours to accept before I turned off my phone. By 1 p.m., he'd signed. By 2 p.m., I was logged into their temporary stream remotely, stabilizing it with the same software I used for years, and walking Tara through a patched-together version of my original event workflow. And by 4 p.m., my invoice had been paid in full. No apologies, no recognition, just a confirmation email, and a note at the bottom. Please keep your availability open for future events. I closed my laptop. If they wanted me, they'd pay my rate. Not because I was bitter, but because knowing your value is only half the battle. The other half is making sure no one gets it for free. By Tuesday morning, I'd already had 3 inquiries, not from Ridgeway, from their competitors. One was a mid-sized conference group who had followed the Northcrest livestream and noticed something odd, that the stream quality had improved mid-event despite obvious tech hiccups earlier in the day. The organizer called it a mystery save. The second was a nonprofit in the education sector. They'd been at the event. Their director pulled me aside during the awkward lunch break and said, "I don't know what happened this morning, but someone fixed it. Was that you?" I simply nodded. "You freelance?" he asked. "I do now." I didn't sleep much that week. Not because I was stressed, not anymore, but because something inside me had clicked. Something I hadn't felt in years. Momentum. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building. Every document I created, every client conversation, every minute spent updating my old logo. It felt like I was finally pouring all those invisible hours into something that was mine. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about how it all started. 15 years, no formal title changes, no bonuses for the overnight fixes, no official acknowledgement when I prevented a major security breach during an international live event. I was always just the media designer, even when I was also the AV lead, the backup coordinator, the vendor liaison, and the person who climbed the scaffolding at 6 a.m. to tape down a cable no one else noticed. And Greg? He was already shopping for his next intern. By Thursday, Ridgeway had another problem. They were scheduled to host a product launch for one of their major clients, a long-term contract that had been Lisa-dependent from the beginning. The client, a large tech firm, insisted on a full mock run of the event 48 hours ahead of time. It was standard. What wasn't standard was that the moment the client arrived at the venue, they realized something was off. No signal flow, no directional monitors, no backup rig, and no Lisa. Tara called me from the back loading dock, whispering. "They're trying to fake their way through this setup. The client's head of communications is furious. He literally said, 'Where's the woman who usually runs this? We don't want kids with clipboards. We want the expert.'" "Let me guess," I said. "They're stalling." Hard. Greg's sweating through his blazer. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered him sitting across from me just 1 week ago, arms folded, offering a 1-paragraph severance letter and the words, "Take everything that's yours." Now he was learning what that really meant. That evening, I got an email. Not from Ridgeway, but directly from the tech firm's comms director. "Hi, Lisa. I understand you're no longer with Ridgeway Events. A shame, considering every product launch we've done with them was a result of your preparation. Are you available for independent consultation?" That one email changed everything. Within 48 hours, I had signed my first official client under my new business name, LJ Event Systems. And the scope? Full technical consulting for all U.S. product launches for the next 12 months. Custom workflows. Equipment recommendations. Live support. Optional. My name on the contract. Not hidden in the background. Not borrowed. Mine. By the following Monday, Ridgeway's product launch had been downgraded to a static presentation. No live stream. No interactive panel. Just a slideshow and a podium mic that kept cutting out. The tech firm quietly canceled their multi-year event contract later that week. Tara forwarded me the internal memo. Greg blamed resourcing complications and unforeseen staffing transitions. He never once said my name, but I didn't need him to. My name was already appearing in other inboxes, recommended by that same tech firm to 3 of their partner companies. all asking the same thing. Are you available? We're looking for someone reliable. We heard what you did. That Friday, a package arrived on my doorstep. Inside was a small glass plaque. It wasn't flashy, just a single line of engraving. In recognition of everything you held together. Tara. I stood there for a long time, plaque in hand, blinking back tears. Not because I needed validation, but because after so many years of being unseen, it felt like someone had finally noticed. I sent Tara a thank you message. She didn't reply right away. Later, I'd find out she was prepping for her final exit interview. She'd had enough, too. Greg had underestimated the cost of losing me. What he didn't realize yet was that the fallout was just beginning. You can fire the person, but you can't fire the foundation they built out from under you and expect the building to stay standing. By the third week, Ridgway had lost 2 more clients. It wasn't loud or dramatic. There was no scandal or leaked memo, just quiet cancellations one after another. Events postponed indefinitely. Budgets reevaluated. Decision-makers ghosting Greg's follow-up emails. I wasn't celebrating. At least not in the gloating, champagne-popping way you might expect. Because while Ridgway was unraveling, I was drowning in opportunity. Word had gotten around. That woman who saved the Northcrest conference? The one who built Ridgway's entire tech infrastructure on her own dime and walked away with it? Yeah, her. Suddenly, I wasn't just getting interest from clients. I was getting approached by vendors, equipment suppliers, venue managers, people I'd worked alongside for over a decade who finally knew my name. Lisa, if you ever need lighting rigs for your own shows, we'll cut you a great deal. Hey, we've got some beta gear we'd love for you to test, if you're interested. We're short-staffed for the Education Futures Summit. Any chance you'd consult? The irony wasn't lost on me. At Ridgway, I was the person people emailed after they'd talked to everyone else. Now, I was the first name on the list. Tara officially left Ridgway that Wednesday. She didn't make a scene. No farewell speech, just a quiet lunch with 2 other colleagues who had already handed in their notice. They offered me a loyalty bonus to stay. She told me on the phone that evening, her voice dry with sarcasm. Can you believe that? I laughed. Did you take it? Nope. I accepted a job with one of the nonprofit clients you worked with last year. They offered me a better salary, better hours, and they actually asked me what I wanted out of the role. I was proud of her. Not just for leaving, but for finally choosing herself. That was the real revenge, wasn't it? Not watching a company fail, but watching good people finally recognize their worth and walk out on their own terms. On Friday afternoon, I got a call I didn't expect. It was from Naomi Carter, the CFO of Ridgway's parent company. I'd only met her once at a corporate holiday party where she introduced herself politely, then spent the next 20 minutes talking to Greg about quarterly performance indicators while I poured wine for the sponsors. Lisa, good to speak with you, she said coolly. Likewise, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I wanted to follow up regarding the Northcrest recovery and the product launch situation. I waited. She continued, We've reviewed the recent event outcomes, client losses, and technical issues. It's clear that Ridgway underestimated your role in the infrastructure. That's on us. There was a long pause. I'd like to offer you a formal consulting retainer, she said, directly through corporate, not Ridgway. We'd like your support on 3 upcoming projects. Your experience is difficult to replace. It was almost an apology. Almost. But more importantly, it was recognition from the top, the kind that actually meant something. I told her I'd consider it, then emailed her a quote the next morning. My rate, my terms, no discounts, no favors. She agreed within the hour. Meanwhile, Greg wasn't doing so well. Tara had stayed connected to a few people still inside Ridgway. Word spread that senior leadership had started auditing budgets, client feedback, and project timelines. Apparently, someone had finally asked the right question. How did we let her go without knowing what she was responsible for? According to Tara, Greg's answer had been, we thought she was just operations. just operations. The person who built the media systems from scratch. The person who trained every intern, wrote the setup guides, managed every major broadcast Ridgeway had ever delivered. It was laughable. But it was also typical. Companies love to use words like team and family when things are going well. But the moment money gets tight, the first heads on the chopping block are the ones who say yes too often and make miracles look routine. By the end of that month, Ridgeway lost its largest annual client, a healthcare group that had contracted them for 10 years straight. I knew the organizer. She sent me a LinkedIn message. They said you weren't with the company anymore. I told them, no Lisa, no contract. Just wanted you to know. That was the moment it truly hit me. I hadn't just been a part of Ridgeway. I had been Ridgeway for a long time. They just never bothered to see it, until it was too late. And yet, I didn't feel rage, or even triumph, just clarity. Because when you spend years doing the work of 5 people, constantly proving your value, constantly being told you're lucky to be here, you start to believe it's true. That being needed is the same as being respected. But they're not the same. And now that I had finally drawn that line, I wasn't going back. Not for Ridgeway. Not for anyone. 3 months after I walked out of Ridgeway events, I stood backstage at the Lakeside Civic Auditorium, clipboard in hand, headset snug against my ear, watching a room of 800 people take their seats for the Education Futures Gala. My show. Not Ridgeway's. Not Greg's. Mine. LJ Event Systems had landed its 5th contract in just 8 weeks. Our calendar was booked through the fall. I had hired 2 part-time AV techs and a virtual assistant. I wasn't just busy. I was finally in control. Camera 2, stand by, I said into the mic. We're live in 3, 2. The live stream began without a hitch. Smooth, polished, precise. The way it always was. Only now the credit wasn't going to someone else. Later that night, as the applause faded and the audience filed out, I checked my email for any post-event feedback. Among the client messages and vendor updates was one that made me freeze. Subject: Ridgeway request. It was from Naomi Carter again. Lisa, I hope this message finds you well. Ridgeway Events has undergone a series of internal changes. Greg Reynolds has officially resigned. We've also parted ways with 2 other senior staff members. We are reevaluating the company's structure and would like to extend an offer for you to return, not to your old role, but to lead a new division focused on event technology strategy and consulting. You would report directly to me. I read the message twice, then a 3rd time. They weren't just asking me back. They were offering me leadership, authority, autonomy, a chance to rebuild the house they had once tossed me out of. But I'd already built something better. I clicked reply and typed slowly, carefully. Hi, Naomi. Thank you for the update and the generous offer. I'm proud of the work I did at Ridgeway, but I've since moved on to pursue my own path. LJ Event Systems is now fully operational, and I'm focused on growing something that reflects my values: accountability, respect, and ownership. I do wish Ridgeway the best during this transition. Let me know if you'd like to discuss licensing access to any of our technical frameworks. Happy to talk business. Just not employment. Warmly, Lisa Jennings, founder, LJ Event Systems. I hovered over send for a moment, then clicked. It didn't feel spiteful. It felt final. A week later, I was invited to speak on a panel for women in media tech. The topic? What happens when they replace you and you replace yourself with something better? I shared the full story. The silent burnout. The downsizing. The moment I was told to take everything that's yours. The realization that everything that made Ridgeway work had been quietly carried in and cared for by me, year after year. After the panel, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous. Early 20s, maybe a year out of college. Hi. I just wanted to say thank you. I was recently told by my boss that people like me don't last in this industry. I was thinking of quitting. But your story... She hesitated. It reminded me that I'm not crazy. That some of us really are doing everything. And getting none of the credit. I smiled. You're not crazy. You're just ahead of the curve. Document everything. Put your name on your work. And don't wait until someone gives you permission to own your value. She nodded, teary-eyed. That moment alone made it all worth it. By the end of that quarter, Ridgway had lost 4 long-term clients. Their stock among vendors and sponsors had taken a hit. Meanwhile, LJ Event Systems had signed with 2 national nonprofits and was negotiating its first licensing deal with an AV platform provider, using diagrams, documents, and systems I'd developed long ago. On nights no one at Ridgway ever knew I stayed late to finish. Not out of obligation, but because I cared. They never understood that. They just assumed I was lucky to have a job. Now they were lucky if they could get me on the phone. As I sat at my desk one evening, sorting through proposals and onboarding forms, I looked around my new office. A converted space above a co-working studio, bright with natural light, covered in sticky notes, whiteboards, and cables coiled neatly on the shelves. Everything here was mine. And more importantly, everything here was built from scratch, not stolen or borrowed or downsized. At 56, I had finally achieved what no promotion could ever give me: agency, ownership, and respect, on my own terms. Because when Greg told me, "Take everything that's yours," he had no idea what that included. It wasn't just my lights and cameras. It wasn't just my workflow or expertise. It was my power. And now, I'll never hand it over for free again. You're not on the list. Those words hit harder than I expected, mostly because of how casually they were spoken. The event planner barely looked at me as she held the clipboard between us like a shield. Behind her, the glittering hotel ballroom was alive with clinking glasses, laughter, and the soft echo of jazz drifting from the live quartet near the stage. I blinked. "Could you check again? Ashley Carter. I'm with the strategy division." Her mouth twitched, a rehearsed, almost apologetic smile. "Sorry, this is for select leadership and award recipients only." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there on the sidewalk, heels sinking slightly into the snow-softened carpet leading up to the entrance. The January air bit at my skin, but the sting in my chest was worse. Behind me, the crowd of arriving guests moved past, chatting and laughing, welcomed in without hesitation. Then came the voice I dreaded. "Oh, wow. You actually showed up?" I turned. It was Kelsey, my coworker, and the intern who'd somehow been promoted after presenting my year-long project as her own. She wore a floor-length navy gown and confidence like perfume. Beside her, her date smirked and looked me over like I was some out-of-place caterer. "Who invites a nobody?" She laughed, brushing past me and disappearing into the warmth and light. I could have left right then. Most would have. But I stood there a moment longer, letting the reality settle over me like frost on a windowpane. 6 years. 6 years of late nights, hitting deadlines no one else could. Fixing systems I didn't break, building models they didn't understand. And still, I was standing outside while the people who stepped on my work were celebrated inside. Then I felt the vibration in my coat pocket. It was my phone. The screen lit up with one word. "Ready?" It was the message I'd been waiting for. I didn't hesitate. I hit send and walked away. Before I tell you what that message did, before the calls, the chaos, the fallout, I want you to pause. Just for a moment. Have you ever stood outside something you helped build? Watched from the cold while others drank the wine you bought? Wore the clothes you ironed? Delivered the speech you wrote? If you've ever been overlooked, undervalued, or called a nobody by people who only succeeded because of you, then this story is for you. Because what happened next? Changed everything. My name is Ashley Carter. Until that night, I was a senior strategy analyst at Ethereum Logistics, a rising disruptor in the supply chain industry, as the trade magazines like to call it. And for most of my career, I believed that hard work was enough. My background wasn't flashy. I didn't go to an Ivy. I wasn't related to a board member. I didn't flirt with executives during Friday happy hours. I just delivered, over and over. I had built a simulation model that saved the company $2.6 million in Q3, caught a forecasting error that would have tanked a seven-figure client deal, created the real-time optimization algorithm that, ironically, was being celebrated at that very gala. But none of that mattered the day Dominic Foster became our new VP. Dominic was the kind of leader who used charm like a blade. Smooth in meetings, sharp in private. He praised ideas in public, then dissected you in one-on-ones. And somehow, Kelsey, the intern, was always nearby. She started sitting in on meetings she wasn't invited to, echoed phrases I'd used in private Slack messages, quoted numbers only I had analyzed. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then came the board meeting in October. I wasn't invited. But Kelsey presented my model, word for word, my charts, my metrics, even my color coding. And Dominic beamed with pride as if she were his protege. I said nothing that day, but I stopped sharing after that, stopped trusting, and I started planning. Over the next few months, while they celebrated wins built on my work, I started building something else. A backup plan? Number A, new path. I began documenting every file, every version history, every Slack thread, time-stamped, archived, secured on an encrypted drive not linked to any company system. I started contacting people. Quietly. People who had left the company. Some pushed out, some burned out. People like Jonah from Data Ops who built the forecasting module before Kelsey even joined. Or Priya from Client Strategy who was mysteriously laid off after closing our biggest contract of the year. What we uncovered? A pattern. A culture of exploitation disguised as excellence. And so we began building something of our own. Something better. That night, as I walked away from the gala, snow crunching beneath my heels, I felt nothing but calm. I had sent the message. Not to my manager, not to HR, to the legal team, the media contact, and most importantly, to our top 5 clients, each of whom had expressed growing frustration with our new direction. Attached proof of theft, of misuse, of lies, and a very simple proposal. The next 30 minutes would change everything, but I didn't wait around. I just kept walking. I didn't even make it to the subway station before the call started. 1, 2, 5, 11, 38. The screen glowed with names I knew too well. Dominic, HR, the COO, even Kelsey. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew what they were going to say. I'd heard it all before. It's just business. You're a team player, right? This isn't personal. But this time it was. Deeply personal. Because they hadn't just taken my work. They'd taken my voice, my credibility. And when they locked me out of that gala, they made one final mistake. They underestimated me. When I got back to my apartment that night, I didn't celebrate. I changed into sweatpants, tied my hair back, and opened my laptop. It was time to confirm what I already suspected. The documents had been opened, downloaded, forwarded, screenshots had been taken. The metadata told me everything. I logged into our secure workspace, ours, not theirs, and saw the green light flash. Connected, Jonah, Priya, Elise. We were live. Status? I typed. Priya responded first. PR. CFO forwarded the client memo at 8:11 p.m. Legal read the report at 8:17. Dominic opened the contract audit log. Jonah chimed in next. JN. One of the clients, Westline Freight, asked for a meeting tomorrow morning. They saw your offer. Looks like they're ready to talk. I stared at the screen, heart pounding not from fear, but clarity. Every move we made was within bounds. Every document cited public performance metrics, internal reporting files I had access to, and client-facing data I had personally developed. And most importantly, every innovation they were parading around had my name stamped in the file history. Let me be clear, I didn't want to destroy anyone. I didn't want revenge for its own sake. What I wanted was simple: acknowledgement, fairness, a seat at the table I helped build. But when every door slammed shut, I realized I didn't need their table. I could build my own. It started 6 months earlier. The company had begun shifting its structure, or so they said. Realigning, Dominic called it. New faces appeared in high-level meetings. Titles shifted without explanation. People were promoted without performance reviews. Some teams saw layoffs. Others, like ours, saw sudden growth. Just not for the people who'd earned it. The warning signs were everywhere. Priya had been leading our international client portfolio for 3 years when she was pulled off a major deal and replaced by someone with a fancier LinkedIn profile. She protested. 2 weeks later, her position was eliminated. Jonah, the data ops lead, built the system we all relied on for logistics efficiency. After requesting budget for upgrades, he was suddenly demoted and reassigned. No explanation, no justification. The message was clear. Loyalty doesn't matter. Politics do. I began archiving everything. Not in secret, but in silence. Quietly. Diligently. I stored version histories, email receipts, meeting logs. I tracked deliverables and who presented them. And when the intern, Kelsey, started showing up to meetings quoting slides I hadn't shared with her, I added timestamps to everything I built. I never accused her, never confronted her. I just prepared. 3 months ago, I reached out to Priya and Jonah. Not with accusations, but with a question. If you could build a company from scratch, how would you do it differently? We talked for hours, then weeks. Then we began sketching. We weren't naive. We weren't planning to build a billion-dollar empire overnight. But we believed in something simple. A company that didn't reward exploitation. A company where impact outweighed title. Where talent wasn't wasted under middle managers obsessed with optics. We built the framework. Then we filed for an LLC. Under a name that meant something to all of us. Verdance, from verdant, meaning fresh growth after a long winter. Back in the apartment, the messages kept coming. Dominic. Ashley, call me immediately. This isn't how professionals handle things. Kelsey. I didn't know the whole story. Can we talk? Please. HR. This matter has escalated. We'd like to invite you for a formal meeting. I shut the laptop. It was too late for apologies, too late for warnings dressed up as diplomacy. They'd called me a nobody. They'd laughed, toasted inside while I stood in the cold. And now, they were scared. The next morning, we met with Westline Freight in a private video call. I presented our alternative system, more transparent, more efficient, more agile than anything Ethereum currently offered. They didn't hesitate. We've been waiting for someone to build this, the VP said. Send over the paperwork. By noon, we had our first official client. By 6 p.m., I was officially no longer employed at Ethereum. They didn't fire me. I resigned. Sent my letter in silence. No speech, no fanfare. I just clicked send and felt free. By the time I woke up the next morning, my inbox had 112 unread messages. 3 of them were from the CEO himself. 16 from legal. 1, just 1, from Kelsey. The subject line read, I think we made a mistake. She didn't know the half of it. I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into Verdance's dashboard. Overnight, the Westline Freight deal had triggered a ripple effect. A second client, Atlas Port Group, reached out after someone in their procurement department saw our presentation slides, likely forwarded by a frustrated contact on the inside. They wanted a meeting. That afternoon, I met with Jonah and Priya in the co-working space we were renting by the hour. There was nothing glamorous about it, just 3 desks, a coffee machine that sputtered more than it brewed, and a cracked window that whistled when the wind picked up. But it was ours. Jonah had barely slept. He looked exhausted but energized, like a man who'd just realized the cage door was open. I mapped out the optimization module based on their most recent performance reports, he said, spinning his laptop around to show me the live dashboard. Priya leaned over his shoulder. If this works the way we think it will, it could cut Atlas Port's holding costs by 19%. In Q1 alone. My heart thudded in my chest. Let's make sure they see that clearly. We spent the next 4 hours rehearsing our pitch. It wasn't just about numbers. It was about credibility. Atlas Port was a $700 million company. If they signed with us, there was no turning back. Meanwhile, at Ethereum, panic was quietly bleeding through the cracks. Former coworkers started messaging me on private accounts, some congratulating me, others fishing for information. One DM stood out. Ashley, legal just pulled all our internal Slack archives. Everyone's paranoid. Dominic's locked in meetings with compliance. They think more people are leaving. Are they right? I didn't reply. But yes, they were right. 2 more employees had already agreed to join Verdance if our funding round closed. Elise from partnerships, Matt from enterprise sales. Both of them had been pushed aside or spoken over so many times, they barely needed convincing. We weren't just building a company. We were building a haven. The Atlas Port meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. They logged in from a sleek, glass-walled conference room. We logged in from a space with a flickering light overhead and a whiteboard still stained from someone else's brainstorm. But we were ready. I shared my screen and walked them through the entire framework. How we'd restructure their supplier prioritization model, use real-time data analytics to forecast bottlenecks, and provide executive-level dashboards that actually made sense. When I finished, no one said a word for 5 full seconds. Then came the question, why isn't your system already on the market? Priya answered, calm and direct. Because until now, the people who built it weren't the ones allowed to launch it. By 4 p.m., we had a verbal agreement. At 5:37 p.m., Dominic called again. This time, he left a voicemail. Ashley, we need to talk. Look, I know things weren't handled perfectly, but going behind the company's back, poaching clients, that's career suicide. We can still fix this if you come in tomorrow. There's a new position we've been discussing. Vice President of Strategy. We can even talk equity. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about a title. At 6:02 p.m., I received an email marked urgent. It was from Ethereum's legal counsel. The subject line, cease and desist, unauthorized use of confidential materials. They claimed I had violated confidentiality clauses by misappropriating intellectual property. They referenced client lists, pitch materials, and optimization models. But what they didn't realize or didn't want to admit was that everything I had used was created on my personal devices, in my own time, well outside of my employment contract scope. And I had proof. Logs, timestamps, witnesses, archived Slack threads. I sent a single reply. Please refer to Clause 9.4 in my signed agreement regarding independent developments. All materials presented to third parties were created without company resources or access to proprietary files. Your team's prior written acknowledgement of this was filed on July 3rd, 8:12 a.m., confirmed by IP audit logs. Happy to provide additional documentation if necessary. I never heard from legal again. That night, I sat in bed with a takeout box balanced on one knee and my laptop on the other. On the screen was a spreadsheet titled Pipeline Phase 2. There were 4 companies listed, all of them Ethereum clients. All of them had experienced recent issues: slow implementation, poor communication, tech stagnation. And all of them had previously reached out to me directly with questions before Dominic had ordered them redirected to someone more senior. Now they were circling back. Not because of a grudge, not because of drama, but because they wanted solutions, real ones. At 11:48 p.m., I got one last message from a number I didn't recognize. They're losing it. Kelsey's crying. Dominic's office light has been on for hours. You've shaken the whole place. No name, no signature. Just someone watching the fallout from the inside. I stared at it for a moment, then locked my phone and closed my laptop. Tomorrow, we'd meet with our third potential client. And this time, we wouldn't be renting by the hour. 2 weeks after I stood outside that gala in the freezing cold, we secured our third client. We signed the contract inside our first actual office space, a converted third-floor walk-up above a shuttered tailor shop downtown. The floor creaked. The windows stuck. The heating was unreliable, but I didn't care. It was ours. The contract was with Eastridge Freight Solutions, one of Ethereum's most profitable mid-tier accounts. They had quietly reached out to Jonah after reading about our deal with Atlasport. The email said, "We've been concerned with declining service levels. We'd like to explore alternatives." It was only one sentence, but I'd read it 5 times. Eastridge moving their business? That was the first sign Ethereum had a real problem. And still, they didn't understand what was happening. On the 3rd Friday of that month, the story broke. We had just finished a late strategy session. Jonah was ordering pizza. Priya was running through implementation timelines. When my phone lit up. Breaking. Internal shakeup at Ethereum Logistics amid client departures and former employee startup buzz. The headline hit Tech Today, then spread like wildfire. Within the hour, 4 other outlets picked it up. Our inbox was swamped with interview requests. LinkedIn exploded. Even a podcast host I'd never heard of messaged me asking for a guest slot. I didn't post anything. Not a statement. Not a tweet. We didn't have to. The next morning, I got an email from Rebecca Lang, a senior associate at Weston Capital. She'd seen the press, reviewed our background, and wanted to set up a call. We met Monday over Zoom. She was sharp, concise, and didn't waste time. "I know early-stage funding isn't your focus yet," she said, "but if you're serious about scaling, we'd like to be involved. Your market fit is unusually strong for this stage, and the founding story, let's just say it resonates." She wasn't wrong. I told her we'd think about it. The truth was, we'd been bootstrapping, pulling from personal savings, side consulting gigs, and modest monthly retainers from our clients. But funding would change the game. The question was whether it would change us, too. Meanwhile, Ethereum was in full containment mode. One of my former coworkers, Elise, forwarded a company-wide email she'd received. It was from Dominic. Subject: Navigating change with strength. We've experienced some recent transitions that have sparked external speculation. Please remember, we remain committed to our values of innovation, collaboration, and excellence. No single individual defines our success. Translation: Panic, thinly veiled as control. But behind the curtain, the numbers told a different story. 4 clients had left. 2 large enterprise deals were now on hold. Half a dozen key staff had either resigned or gone silent, likely planning their exits. Their stock dipped 11% in 10 days. Then came the meeting with Weston. Rebecca and 2 partners offered us a $1.6 million seed round on a clean term sheet. No grabby clauses, no creative equity traps. I should have been thrilled. But I was cautious. We spent the weekend reviewing the offer. Every detail. Every clause. I'd seen too many companies gain traction only to become swallowed by the same politics they tried to escape. That wouldn't happen here. Priya said it best. We didn't leave one broken machine just to build another. We negotiated for founder-controlled governance, non-dilutive grants for our first hires, commitment to inclusive hiring practices written into our operating agreement. They agreed. We signed the term sheet Monday morning. Verdance officially had funding. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't dependent on anyone's permission to lead. Later that week, Dominic made a public statement. Not a press release. A video. It was 2 minutes and 44 seconds long. Slick lighting. Company banners behind him. A carefully written script. "Innovation is a collective journey," he said. "We celebrate all contributors, past and present. We wish our former employees well in their ventures. But rest assured, Ethereum's foundation is strong." The smile at the end was hollow. What really caught my eye, though, was the twitch in his left hand, the slight tremble, the forced calm. He knew the ground was shifting. He just didn't know how fast. That same evening, Elise called me. "I'm done," she said. "I can't stay there anymore. It's like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Nobody trusts each other. Half the team's pretending nothing's wrong, and the other half is updating their resumes during lunch." I didn't push her. I didn't offer a job. But 3 days later, she sent me a message. "If you have space for someone who still believes in building something real, I'm in." We onboarded Elise as our client success lead the following Monday. Her first order of business: finalizing the onboarding process for Vandrix Maritime, our fourth client, and our largest yet. They came to us without even being approached. Ethereum overpromised and underdelivered. Their CTO said, "You already seem to be delivering before we've even signed." That wasn't an exaggeration. Jonah had sent them a prototype dashboard as a sample. They showed it to their board. That night, they called us. What we were building was working. Not because it was loud or flashy, but because it was built on credibility, clarity, and the one thing Ethereum had forgotten: trust. And while they scrambled to salvage their image, we were just getting started. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I saw the email. Subject line: confidential, meeting request from Ethereum Executive Board. At first, I thought it was a prank. The address was official. No spoofing. The message short and direct. "Ms. Carter, on behalf of Ethereum's executive leadership, we request a private meeting to discuss potential avenues for collaboration or resolution. Sincerely, Preston Langley, Chairman of the Board." Preston Langley, the man whose name had only existed on letterhead and press releases, the shadow behind the curtain. Now, he wanted a meeting. With me? I read the message 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Priya and Jonah. Priya's reply came first. "You know what this is, right?" "This isn't a conversation. It's a containment strategy." Jonah's was more succinct. "If they're panicking, we're doing something right." The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning at a neutral downtown law office. I didn't go alone. Our counsel came with me, and I brought printed documentation, just in case. The conference room was clinical: glass walls, bottled water, a large screen no one used. Preston Langley was already seated when I arrived. Immaculate suit, silver cufflinks, composed face. Dominic sat beside him, wearing the same strained smile I remembered from my performance reviews. And next to him, surprisingly, was Kelsey. She didn't look smug this time. She looked tired. "Thank you for coming," Langley said. I nodded. "Let's keep it efficient." Dominic spoke first, trying to soften the ground. "We recognize that mistakes were made, misunderstandings, breakdowns in communication." "You mean the part where I wasn't allowed into the gala celebrating work I created?" I asked evenly. He paused. "We want to move forward constructively." Langley cut in. "Ms. Carter, we're prepared to make a serious offer. Ethereum would like to acquire Verdance, including its intellectual property and client relationships. In return, we're offering a high 7-figure payout, equity, and a leadership position: Chief Innovation Officer." I didn't answer right away. I looked at Kelsey. Her eyes flicked down. She couldn't meet my gaze. I turned back to Langley. "You want to acquire the company you tried to discredit? The same company your legal team threatened 2 weeks ago. The same company that exists because you undervalued the people who built your success." Langley didn't flinch. "Business evolves. You're clearly a talented leader. But competing against Ethereum is an uphill battle. We have scale, resources, reach. You also have a PR crisis," I said. 4 major clients gone, a public stock dip, and a rapidly growing narrative that your company rewards the wrong people." Dominic shifted in his seat. Langley's voice hardened slightly. "We don't intend to let this go on indefinitely. If you refuse the offer, we will pursue all available measures: competitive blockades, legal routes, strategic buyouts of key personnel." Our attorney leaned forward. none of which will hold up, given our IP filings and non-compete exemptions under state law. Langley looked at me again. Ashley, you built something great, but you're still small. We're giving you a chance to fold it into something bigger. Secure your legacy, and move on from this fight. I looked around the room. The polished table, the sterile walls, the people who once told me I wasn't worth a seat. Then I reached into my folder and pulled out a single page. A graph, client growth, by week, Verdance's line, rising fast, Ethereum's declining, client by client. I already am something bigger, I said quietly. I'm not here to secure my legacy. I'm building it. Langley looked at Dominic. Dominic looked at Kelsey. She finally spoke. I didn't know how much of it was yours. I only saw what I was given. I'm sorry. I gave her a slow nod. I believe you, but the damage was done. Langley stood. Very well. We'll consider this conversation closed. I stood too. No, Mr. Langley. You'll consider it closed. I'm just getting started. When we left that building, the sun was sharp and clear. It was still cold, but I didn't feel it. By the time we got back to the office, our inbox held a new message. Client inquiry, Global Apex Freight. Their contract with Ethereum was up for renewal. They wanted a call. Jonah looked at me. Should we take it? I smiled. Let's make room. That night, we stayed late in the office. Not to catch up, to prepare. Because the next step wasn't just growth, it was scaling. Real systems, full-time staff, international expansion. They had offered me a title. I'd chosen a mission, and the ripple was turning into a wave. 1 year to the day after I stood outside the gala with snow soaking through my shoes, I stepped onto a stage under bright lights. This time, invited. It was the annual Logistics and Innovation Conference, the biggest industry event of the year. My name was printed on the program as keynote speaker, and the room was full. Executives, investors, founders, analysts, and yes, even a few familiar faces from Ethereum. Funny how things come full circle. I stood at the podium and looked out at hundreds of faces, some smiling, some skeptical, some waiting for a story. So I gave them one. Exactly 1 year ago today, I began. I was told I wasn't on the list. I stood outside a gala, one that celebrated a project I had built, while my former coworkers toasted inside. Even the intern who had taken credit for my work was applauded while I stood in the cold. The room was silent. I didn't argue. I didn't knock on the door. I just pulled out my phone and pressed send. You could feel the shift. Some leaned in, others nodded, just slightly. The quiet recognition of being excluded, of being overlooked. I didn't spend the speech attacking Ethereum. That wasn't the point. I didn't need to name them. They had already named themselves in headlines, in shareholder calls, in whispered updates across the industry. Instead, I told the truth. How Verdance had started with 3 people in a co-working space and grown to a team of 42. How we had launched with 0 external funding and now operated in 3 countries, serving 12 major clients, 7 of whom had once worked with Ethereum. How we'd built a company where people stayed late not because they were scared, but because they were invested. Where performance reviews didn't reward who talked the loudest, but who built the most. I shared our framework, our hiring process, our team principles, the things we said no to just as much as the things we said yes to. And finally, I shared the most important part. We didn't succeed because we wanted revenge. We succeeded because we knew something better was possible. We left the old table behind and built our own. One where everyone has a seat and no one has to beg to be seen. I finished to quiet applause. The kind that builds slowly, not because people feel obligated, but because something landed. I stepped down from the stage, my heart full. Not from pride, but peace. After the keynote, there was a long line of people wanting to talk. Founders, analysts, even students from the university who'd been invited. But one person stood a little apart from the line. Kelsey. She looked different. Softer somehow. Her expression was cautious, not arrogant. When I walked over, she held out her hand. "I just wanted to say congratulations," she said. "That was a powerful speech." "Thank you," I replied, and I meant it. "I've been at a different company since June," she added, "still trying to figure out who I am when I'm not following someone else's script." That surprised me. "I hope they're treating you better." "They are," she said, "but I needed to hear this today." I gave her a small nod. "We all start somewhere. What matters is where we decide to go next." She smiled. "Good luck with Verdance." I looked around the conference center. My name on banners, people holding Verdance-branded folders, our booth crowded with curious attendees. "We don't need luck," I said gently. "We just need the chance to do what we were already doing all along, just in the right place." The next week, Verdance closed its Series A funding round. $8 million, led by one of the same firms that had once passed over my resume without a second look. We opened new offices in Austin and Rotterdam, hired our 50th employee, hit a profitability milestone ahead of schedule. But none of that was what stuck with me. What stuck with me were the emails, dozens of them, from people I didn't know, analysts, designers, account managers, former interns, people who'd been told they were just something, just a junior, just support, just a number. "Your story made me quit my job. Your keynote made me rethink what kind of leader I want to be. You reminded me I'm not crazy for wanting respect." And this one: "Thank you for showing us that being excluded doesn't make us less valuable. It just means we were never meant to stay there." Sometimes I think about that night. The cold, the laughter through the windows, the sting in my chest. It doesn't hurt anymore. Now, I think about the people inside that ballroom, and I wonder if they ever realized how close they were to keeping me. If someone had just said, "Hey, you deserve to be here," maybe none of this would have happened. But I'm glad they didn't, because being pushed out forced me to stop asking for space and start creating it instead. The real victory wasn't taking clients or headlines or market share. It was showing what can happen when you stop trying to squeeze into someone else's version of success and start building something of your own. Not in spite of being excluded, but because of it.